Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I am Coach Kim in New York City, and today's podcast is about breathing while you exercise. I bring it up today because I was out with a bunch of people training to run a marathon. Most bucket list marathoners, meaning they are either raising, well, in this particular case, they're raising money for charity to get a guaranteed entry to run the New York City Marathon, and they are novices. They're not real runners. Most of the people, at least, are out raising money because they want to help this charity and then using the marathon as a reason to develop the skills to endure the marathon experience. And we talked a lot about breathing yesterday because when you are exercising for more than, even when you're exercising for short periods of time, but for sure when you are in an endurance activity. So forget the word exercise here. Let's talk about the word recreation and the endurance activities that relate to more than 1 hour of your time. It could be, biking on a trail for some period of time. It can, of course, there are breaks built in and lunch probably built in or whatever, or hiking, or training for a marathon. Perhaps it's, a long game of tennis, long match of tennis. All of those things really take their toll on your energy sources inside of your body and thus your body's ability to function properly. And so breathing, while is a really critical component of a body's ability to function, it is not an attribute of most training programs, specifically for running. But being in this business now, In Shape Fitness has been around for 22 years. We have been working with people in New York City and online and in companies around the country for that long of a time. And it has only been in the last few years that our team has zeroed a little bit into the sort of a better space in terms of talking about breathing patterns and understanding the value of breathing. So we're going to talk a lot about that. It's not a workout today, but I do want to start with a postural systems check because that is what I like to do, and it helps you get all of the noise out of your brain, zero in on your body, and think about how you can put some of these ideas into practice for yourself. So stand up really tall if you can stand up. Hopefully you are in a space when you're listening to this where at the very least you can sit up really tall and contract your tummy muscles, pull your belly button sort of in and up a little bit towards your spine in order to make sure that you don't stick your butt out and contract your lower back and thus deviate from the best posture that your body can have. You want to think of yourself in terms of the plumb line that exists, an invisible line that runs down your body, on the side of your body, from the top of your head down to your ankles. When you're sitting, and if your butt is sticking out, obviously the plumb line is affected by sitting, but when you sit and you're kind of either craning your head forward or your shoulders are curled in because you're typing so much, or your butt is sort of sticking out because you're sort of reaching for something or whatever, you lose that efficiency of and the benefits of having proper posture. And when we get into the thick of things in terms of the breathing, it does actually affect your deviation from proper posture can affect your efficiency in breathing as well. So the postural systems check that you're taking right now is to think about that plumb line. If you're standing up, your straight invisible line is running down the side of your head, so through your ears, and then through the space where your shoulder is. So your chest is open, your shoulders are back, so through those shoulders, and then down to where your pelvis is, where the top of your hip bone is, and then down the leg, ending, of course, at your ankle. Then the other thing you want to think about is the plant of your feet. when you stand up and you stand up really tall, you should be able to take a second, a couple of deep breaths, to think about a couple of deep breaths worth of time, to think about where your feet are in terms of your hips, your knees, and then your ankles, and then the position of your feet themselves. So if your natural sort of go-to subconscious way of standing up tall is to turn out your toes, which is a pretty common mistake that people make. It's not even a mistake, really, because that implies that there's some sort of conscious effort, an error being made, and that isn't really what's happening. It's just that your toes turn out because you're seeking greater stability. You probably have people that do this naturally, have weakness on the sides of the legs, on the inner thighs, in the inside of the legs, as well as the outside of the legs. Tightness in the IT band, a weakness in the hip structure, hip flexors, and the glutes, and then all kinds of issues related to just sort of the center of gravity not being perfectly correct because of overweight conditions, potentially just extra weight on your body, on your frame, and then the condition with your head being positioned off of its proper postural correction or correct position at the top of the plumb line. Your head sort of craning forward alters the center of your gravity, which means that your body seeks that extra stability and turns out the toes as a result of that, because you are seeking the support that you need, and you're going to get it more from your thighs than you are if your feet are straight and you have to engage the rest of the leg. So that's a long postural systems check, but do take a couple of deep breaths and just think about how important it is to maintain a level of awareness about your physical self as you conduct your seated activities, and then when you're standing still. I watch this a lot. Of course, I get to watch a lot of people because I live in New York City and I'm on the subway all the time. I see people standing around waiting for the subway. I see people standing, of course, in line at shopping markets like the rest of the world as well. But I also see people standing and waiting for stoplights at street corners, standing in the park, standing at a bus line, standing. We are a much more active, urban environments are much more active environments for people, for pedestrians. And I value that a great deal, but it's also allowed me, in terms of what I do for a living, to pay attention to the many, many, many mistakes that people make when they're not moving their bodies. And unfortunately, we don't move nearly enough. We make it worse by being still incorrectly. So I overemphasize the postural systems check because it is a big concern, something to think about, and really easy adjustments that you can make when you do center your brain on the attributes of good posture that will help your body instead of work against it. So let's talk about breathing specifically now, because as I said, I was with some people running yesterday, and the thing about long running, we ran somewhere between 8 and 10 miles yesterday. And when you get to mileage of that at that level for any particular run, especially for training for longer races and longer sort of endurance activities, even if it's not running, one thing is certain: the ability for your muscles to consume, to benefit from oxygenated blood is really important. In the hot weather, you need to be hydrated. You need proper nutrition. Of course, you need to understand the mechanics of running and logistics and everything, and deal with the right shoes and the right apparel and sunscreen, all that stuff. But as I said at the very beginning as well, people don't talk nearly enough about the way that you breathe during activities, and breathing in and breathing out as natural and as, sort of subconscious as that bodily function is, when you enhance it by thinking about it more and practicing a regimen of high quality, sort of enhanced breathing, you're going to benefit from it in the activities that you do. So I like to tell people, because this orients your understanding of running in a way that helps that left foot, right foot thing that I talk about a lot. Pivoting is the concept that my company and I define as developing the strength on both the dominant leg and the weaker leg by doing lots of exercises that force the legs to work independently of one another, so that you can do things like run without injury and bicycle, as many miles as you want to without getting injured, to hike without developing injuries, and just to live in general, to do things like, play with your kids in the park or whatever. So when you are inhaling and exhaling as a bodily, thinking about it just as a bodily function, you approach breathing during running or whatever activity with this sort of same inclination that it is just what it is. I go out and I run, therefore I'm breathing because I am alive, and therefore I'm breathing while I am running, and that's that. But as an observer, as a coach, a 9-year veteran of the teaching staff or the coaching staff with Charity for the Roadrunners Club in New York City, I have seen and worked with hundreds and hundreds, thousands of runners, in fact. And the one thing that is a pattern with especially novice runners, slower novice runners, bucket list runners, as I like to call them, inhaling through the mouth and just, sort of gasping for air is a surefire way to a sooner level of a fatigue, of petering out during a run or during a race, and of not achieving the goals that you want to set in order to improve your ability to get through one of these types of longer experiences, longer athletic experiences. Running and acknowledging that breathing as a sort of a lesson, a part of your training plan, is an eye-opening experience. It was to me as a runner, and the research that I did really kind of started, I think it must have started for me with an article that I read in Runner's World. The publisher of Runner's World, Amby Burfoot, wrote about something that he called 3-2 running. And 3-2 running, going back to that concept of pivoting, of right leg strength versus left leg strength, he wrote about 3-2 running, and the way I interpreted it for myself, because I'm left-handed and I don't have a lot of the normal issues that most right-handed runners have. I have a lot of issues on both of my legs because I learned to do so many things right-handed ways. But I interpreted 3-2 breathing with running. So you inhale for 3 steps, exhale for 2. Inhale for 3 steps, exhale for 2. You inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. That's typically what coaches advise people to do anyway. But this 3-2 breathing thing was really interesting to me. And so I started trying to do it. And it is awkward. It feels weird. I kind of feel a little bit totally uncoordinated. In fact, not a little bit, but totally uncoordinated, trying to take 3 steps as you inhale through your nose, and then to take 2 steps and get through the exhale, and then get back to the next inhale. It takes a lot of work to just, it's not like one of those runs where you can go out and say, I'm going to run 5 miles and I'm going to try to figure out how to do this. This is like, try it for a minute, try it for a short period of time, And then if you're trying to get an actual workout in, you go ahead and just sort of move on and do what comes naturally to you, which for most people, as I said before, is just whatever goes, right? So you're just breathing, sort of laissez-faire breathing, in letting the air come into your body and then letting it go out. But once your heart rate is up and once you're really invested in a particular exercise regimen or activity and your heart rate is up, being able to practice this 3-2 running style started to become kind of interesting. It actually started to work. And the last time I ran a full marathon as a participant, it was a few years ago. I was astounded. I didn't think about it the whole race. I wasn't like this like kind of devotion to this practice because, as I said, a lot of things are happening or can happen to runner during any running race. But most of the time you're just sort of dealing with your bodily issues as you're moving forward and taking your steps and talking to people or whatever. But I remember that period of time that, and if you're a runner, you know this, if you run marathons, you get to like mile 17, 18, and you got to dig in deep. It's hard. There's a book called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've probably heard of this book if you haven't already read this book. I've read the book now several times. It's one of my favorites in terms of everything that has to do with exercise, the value of exercise as it relates to humanity and just being able to live, to function well and to live a really active life. And I remember thinking that as you're going through these, sort of the notion of running for 3 steps and then exhaling for 2 steps, and how difficult that is once you hit that, that period known as like the wall. Once you start to fatigue, you dig in and start to fatigue. You have to seek out ways to trick yourself into keeping the pace up, to keep going. People want to stop and walk at that point, particularly people that aren't running super, super fast. And depending on, how your day is going. In Born to Run, I remember reading about a woman who did lots of, sort of ultra running, which to a certain degree, I think to me at least, means anything over a marathon. I don't even know if this person ran races. It was just more like she just loved the act of running and therefore ran all the time. And she, Mr. McDougall writes about how she describes fatigue as like a beast. So I describe this to my runners sometimes where, you think about this sort of scary monster as it's approaching your body. You realize that the fatigue is setting in. It's sort of overcoming your ability to keep the stride up, to keep your panting harder. You feel tired, you feel thirsty and hungry, and you just want to start walking. Your muscles are starting to get really, really fatigued. And she describes the beast in this way, that she looks forward to its first approach, because what she knows is that every time she meets it, every time she meets the beast, when she faces her fatigue, she pushes it away. It's like, pushing it back into the closet. She knows it's going to come back out again. It's like this undulating sense of pain, knowing that the pain is coming back. But every single time during a run, she feels that sense. She gets more efficient and better at pushing it away and continuing to move forward. So breathing during this particular marathon that I ran a couple of years ago was the thing that I used to push the beast away when I started getting to it was around mile 17, mile 18. And that's still a fairly long ways to go from the finish of a marathon. It's more than an hour, roughly an hour, I guess, based on my roughly 8:45, 9-minute pace that I have been known to run for years and years and years now. But it was the longest I sustained that breathing pattern probably ever. And it was the thing that got me through that event. So I started doing a little more research about why it works. And I came upon something in a trade magazine that talks about how inhaling and exhaling affect the nervous system. And there are two things that I found kind of interesting that I want to impart on you, so that as you go back out into your next exercise experience or recreational experience, not only might you take the 3-2 running, pattern. And again, it's really hard to develop. It does wonders for runners, but it is really difficult to develop the sort of conscious, to use that as a tool. However, knowing these two other things about your breath and about how your body functions in terms of muscle contractions and energy use and hormone secretion is a little sciencey, but it's really cool. It's really, really data-based reason to think seriously about breathing when you exercise. And one of the two things that I read is about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and how the nose. So this is where I'm going to now make the overarching suggestion about using the inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth breathing pattern when you exercise over longer periods of time. Just in general, it's also quite good from a meditation perspective. The slow exhale is a source of relaxation. Inhaling faster, exhaling longer. 3-2 breathing, of course, is inhaling slightly longer, exhaling slightly faster. But that's because your heart rate is going to be up. You want to get the waste gases out of your mouth so that you can get back to inhaling and bringing the air that you need into your nose. But inhaling through your nose activates, because of the filters that exist in your nose, activates the parasympathetic nervous system such that you're not at risk of activating the fight or flight system, which is part of the other half of the autonomic central nervous system is parasympathetic and sympathetic. So sympathetic is the nervous system that's part of your more primitive brain. It is the sort of the vital organs function through the sympathetic nervous system. And therefore, when you activate it, you're in that fight or flight kind of primitive mode. Like when you are a lion and you need to chase down a deer, or you are a deer and you are about to be chased down by a lion, you have fight or flight, you activate the sympathetic nervous system. And by virtue of that, your heart rate goes up, stress, like active stress hormones, good stress hormones, right? And for all intents and purposes, the cortisol, the adrenaline, all that just shoots into your bloodstream, and so that your muscles can start firing and you're off. Now, what's the problem with that for our human condition and things like bucket list marathoning is that you already have stress hormones pumping through your veins and your heart rate is already elevated because you're moving at a cadence that requires that. But excess stress hormones and the sympathetic nervous system reaction is going to prevent you from the control that you want to execute over your bodily functions and the relaxation that is so important in terms of the mechanics of your running. So inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth is the most important way to proceed through a training program in terms of your body's ability to get through those difficult recreational or athletic experiences. So that's one thing. The second thing, similar concept, and it's even more sciencey, so I apologize that I'm being real sciencey today. But I didn't want to ignore this most recent thing that I read, because I also thought it was really, really interesting. And that is that when you inhale through your nose, another chemical process takes place as the air passes in through those nasal receptors and goes into your body. It activates a nitric acid process that allows your body to move the oxygen molecules from the bloodstream or from the respiratory system into the bloodstream, and thus into the muscle fibers with a greater amount of efficiency. The carbon dioxide that is utilized in that process, of course, ends up, as I said before, you exhale all that carbon dioxide. You probably remember this from 8th grade science. Humans inhale oxygen and they exhale carbon dioxide. But that the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system allows that chemical process to be more efficient, and thus can help propel your body over longer distances for longer sustained periods of time. So everyone doesn't need to go out and train for a marathon. I am such a big fan of charity running, long distances, and of some of the newer not so like mileage heavy training philosophies behind novice running in the United States, of course, because that's where I live. Because it really isn't about just going out and running, like running all the time. You don't need to run every day. If you want to do a half marathon or a marathon, 3-4 days of running is enough with the, sort of adjunct cross-training types of activities with core-based work and strength training, etc. So a lot of the people that I work with in my company and the people that I train through the Roadrunners Club are so well suited to this adaptation of training that is not super easy to do in practice, but once you get it, once you start thinking about how much benefit there is from inhaling through your nose, and then there's that 3-2 sort of component that slices and dices it just a little more nuanced way. It's gonna stick with you. You can internalize it and then use it as you proceed through any part of your life. And then remember, as you finish up with all of your anything that you're doing from an active perspective, even if you aren't doing anything from an active activities perspective at the end of your day, when you're lying in your bed or lying hopefully on a flat surface and stretching out your body in order to bring your body some relaxation into bring relaxation into your body before you head off to bed, take those deep breaths, these deep guttural breaths. It's meditative. It is rejuvenating in terms of the biology of your body, and it really does help your body and your brain relax so that you can wake up the next day and keep on trucking. I'm Coach Kim from In Shape Fitness. I will see you again next week with another new episode, and make sure that you join me with the AM muscle maintenance workout for this week. We are doing an exercise regimen related to running, as it turns out. We're going to be talking about strength in the butt on the right side versus the left side. Have a great day.